Good day to you, my friends. Thank you for joining me here for another video on the channel. Today we're going to be working on the second part of a two-part video, and here we're going to be creating the base made of two interlocking parts. The previous video, part one, we created the upper part, the tabletop, which also had a nice trim and some sliding drawers. So here we're going to focus on these two portions of the lower base. This is our goal here. These two imaginations set together to make that three-dimensional looking beauty. For some projects that I want to explore the design of more thoroughly, I'll create a simple prototype like this one from either scrap wood or cardboard, just to see how this is going to be size-wise and how it's going to just sit. And I was playing around with different angles for the base. Ended up not going 90 degrees for the intersection of those two base portions, but 65 degrees. So that template helped me just process it and just make a rough estimation of size, just to further think it out before cutting some expensive wood. So after segmenting that main board into these parts here at the miter saw, I'm just going to measure, marking the center and creating a nice tapered look from the base to the top. And these angles aren't anything in particular. It's just going to be equal on both sides. Then we'll move into using our track saw. You might have a different one than myself. This is a wonderful and inexpensive version of a track saw, and it's a nice little attachment that attaches to most circular saws. Just a fantastic and inexpensive, lightweight product that stores very easily. So let's get started on marking the tenons. We're going to do tenons on the top and the bottom of this portion, and the mortise is the part that receives the tenons. That's going to be on the upper part of the base and the lower part of the base. And we'll do this all times two, because our intersecting piece, we're working on two quite identical portions for the base. These tenons are going to measure in about 1 inch. I end up refining that just a little later on, but I want them to submerge up into the mortises to be quite a secure attachment. So with a straight cutting bit at the router, we're going to go ahead and start to make some subsequent passes over and over just to get up to that approximate 1 inch line. And you see a little damage and some tear out, and you can avoid that with a couple different methods. Taping one to reduce any further stress on the wood and chip out. Just paper tape, painter's tape is fine. And I'm not too worried about this damage here, because I'm going to do some planing and sanding on the outside of all of these surfaces, and this is also just a bit of damage that's way at the end. So most of our tenon is going to be completely removed on the outer edge of that area anyway. So we've got our line. I don't like the tear out that's happening from our router to make this nice tenon here. So what we're going to do is we'll come over to our workbench here. We're just going to help it along with a Dozoki saw or Ryobi, not Ryobi. Along when we get back to the router, so we don't have the tear out. For some structural support and some beauty, I decided to go with dowel rods here instead of the planks of walnut. I just wanted to add some contrasting value there, some contrasting lighter wood. And as I continued to flush out that concept, I thought I could do some bending with these dowels with a traditional steam approach, literally right over the oven, the stove in the house, and soak in the wood ahead of time, but we'll dig into that shortly and I'll show you how we can do that. So here we're just marking and measuring for the mortises. That's where the tenons will pierce into that stronger, thicker base on the right there. So I chose to use my drill press just to start making a repeat cut here for carving out our mortise, and we'll clean it up later with some chisels. This could easily be done with a router, and I was just a little too lazy to remove my plunge router from the underside of my base. I just have a single router. But cutting down, plunging down over and over here with the drill press, you can start to chisel out and gouge out what will become that deeper mortise. Cut saw here, and just to help out my router, I'm going to cut a cleaner line with the Dozoki saw. I'm going to go down to that depth, right where that So we'll head back to the router with a 3/4 inch straight cut bit, and we'll just remove part of the wood here that will allow the base portion to stick up into this upper part of the base. As you can see, we've had the edges rounded over. I was repurposing the rounded over pieces from a previous project. This was actually a test piece. Since I already had the edges rounded over, I said, hey, let's use that. I'm going to round those over anyway. But here we'll clean it up with a chisel, and we'll just nestle that supportive part up into this. This is the top part of the base, and we'll see how it looks. So we're setting out our table and the supports below. You can see the table is going to be not exactly a square. A nice rectangle with some sloped edges. If you're able to see these lines here, this is where I've mapped out where I want my leg supports to be as the base comes up this way, or on the bottom of the table. So what I've done here with a rafter square here, just because it's a simple tool at hand, I want my angle to be something less than 90 degrees, because I don't want these to come out as a square. Let me just take us on a little journey. So this is not 90 degrees, and I kind of just organically sketched on where I wanted my proportions to be and the supports to be. So let's determine what that angle is going to be. So here's our pivot point for this specific thing, so it can hang in a rafter. That's its initial design. Right in the middle of my table here. We'll line that up, and way out here, we'll just line that up. Because let's say we wanted a 90-degree angle. This will allow us to ensure that that's true. But if we want less, we can use this same tool. It's a fantastic device that has also degrees. If you haven't been familiar with these simple squares, a lot of them will have on the outside edge. Here we're looking at 65 degrees. So, based on my sketch, we would aim to cut our anchor point, or our pivot point, let's see with our template. Not 90 degrees like this is. Yeah, this is my little template. We want something less. So it's going to be 65-degree angle. So 90 minus 65, 25-degree angle is going to be removed from 90 degrees. So over at our miter saw, our chop saw, I set up a template here, just so it'll help me guide here. We're going to remove 25 degrees. We've got a 90-degree edge here. We cut that, and just to double check that my miter saw is set at that angle, here we go. You can see we're lined up here with the line that was there, right in our center of the table. Now this line lines up nicely with my previously drawn edge. I don't know, that's hard to see, but it does. So we've determined we need a 65-degree angle for our table legs. So here's our table legs. I popped off the top of one that'll be adjacent to the table top, and I've scribed here the center, and we're gonna have these portions be interlocking like what you see here. So this table can be taken apart and put back together easily. I'll take this little guy, the remainder, at 25 degrees, and as I mark my center here on the top of my table, I'll line my saw up with that. That'll help me know, along with a piece of wood that's the same width, a 7/8 of an inch, for the top of our table legs, the base. We simply line that right up. This is our saw guide. Now what I'm doing here is just setting things up so that I can more easily do this on the miter saw, but I don't like having mistakes. So, also don't like chip out. So I took a Sudoku saw. You can start this with a chisel or just a nice marking knife, but we lined our saw up with that angle there. I had previously just placed in pencil just to ensure where our lines were going to be based in the center, because I want these two leg bases to intersect at the center. So let's head right over to that miter saw. We're set at 25 degrees for a tilt for the blade, and we'll just course through and remove that central 7/8 of an inch, and we'll move on to cutting the taller support for the base next. 7/8 thick, which is what we cut on this piece. This will represent the other part of the space. It's going to be 25 degrees rotated, or 65 degrees, however you want to see it. So we're set there. Let's go ahead and bring some of our lines down. So we've predetermined an accurate spacing here at that angle, which is gonna articulate differently than if we were to just have gone with that, like a 90-degree base to each other. Back at the miter saw, we're still set to our 25-degree tilt for the blade, and you can see this is a precarious positioning and a bit potentially dangerous, and we never want to compromise safety for any cut. But I've got a good clamp on there and a nice secure position for my hand for both positions. For we're going to be cutting 2 times here. We'll slide it over to the left here, and we'll take out that 7/8 all the way down through to the depth that my blade will allow me to go here. And we'll continue on the depth of that cut with a Ryoba saw. But anytime you're doing a funky cut like this where your wood is sticking out, you want to make sure that your fingers are safe and that the wood is secure. So to continue with this very thin Ryoba saw, I'm using my fingers here to push that blade toward the outer edge of the cut that my miter saw blade had coursed through there. Now this is probably the third of the depth, or third of the thickness of the miter saw blade. So be careful with your fingers here as you move in that direction of pushing that blade to the outer edge of the cut. And we're just continuing it right on down to where the intersection is going to be for the adjacent table base. We'll clean this up with some chisels a bit and a coping saw or fret saw, whatever we have handy here. We'll just knock out this entire 7/8 inch portion here. Set to be full. I'm just going to say it was there should be fairly accurate, but we have to keep in mind this is a thicker piece for the base and this is going to be significantly thinner, so we'll measure in like we did on the top part.
Oh, that looks crunchy.
Well, while my sweet little apprentice Eleanor over there works on her own little project, I'm just continuing to fit these pieces together on this initial assembly. And I definitely am not a fan of how tight the interlocking segments of the base are here. So they go together, but naturally this is going to be something that's going to be taken apart and put back together, taken apart, put back together by the users. So what I'm going to do to avoid splitting for the upper portion is to insert a little bow tie piece to help secure and minimize splitting. So we'll use a dovetail bit at the router with a piece of matching walnut wood that'll be carved here to fit nicely into that portion just above where I fear there's going to be some significant splitting if there isn't any already. So here with 4 different passes, turning this top bottom, left right, top bottom, we'll come up with this type of shape, and then with the simple saw we'll get rid of that portion. My piece of wood was just a little too high. We'll hit the miter saw and remove a segment of that, and we'll just refine that with a chisel to be the exact shape that we'd like. Then we're going to head over to that main supportive board as part of the base, and we'll just scribe around the outside the exact shape. And we'll just use some chisels and remove that part to the exact depth. We'll do some wood glue, and that'll help prevent any splitting from below and up through this specific area. So I've got 4 dowel rods here. They're birch, hardwood, and they are 25 inches long and 3/4 inch thick. So we're going to steam those on the stove. I've got about 3 or 4 inches of water here. We're going to bring that to a boil, and we're going to continue to add boiling water over the dowel rods, which are tied together to make a makeshift pyramid structure so it's stable. We're going to put a wet towel over that, and then aluminum foil to keep that humidity in there. So these are going to be exposed to boiling water, to the steam, for 1 hour. 1 to 2 hours would be okay for this dowel rod in length. And I've got a pre-created form that will arch these at just a few degrees, so they're not just straight dowels, but nicely aesthetically pleasing bent dowels. And it's very important that you let these soak for 24 hours ahead of time in the bathtub or in whatever tub you've got. Ahead of time, so 24 hours ahead of doing this part of the process. So we're going to clamp these in place around the form for at least 24 hours, and at that point onward they should be permanently bent in whatever form they're in for you. So after getting some good exercise with Eleanor, I've put together my base, and I'm just sizing up and estimating where I'd like this dowel rod to go, and it'll provide some extra support and a good visual interest. So from the top, I'm measuring out 3 inches from the center of the base, and on the bottom, I'm measuring out 6 inches out. We'll head over to the drill press with each of the portions of the top, each of the portions of the bottom, and 5-degree tilt for the base for the drill press here for the top portions, and for the lower parts into the larger, thicker base, it's a 20-degree tilt. So I got a 3/4 inch Forstner bit on there, and see some smoke there, so I'm going a little too fast for it. A few different plunges will serve best here, but I try to work quickly rather than meditatively, unfortunately, most days. So slowing down will help you be a better woodworker than I am most days. So 3/4 inch it's a tight fit for the 7/8 thick lumber there, but with some proper measuring, we're good to go. So at the miter saw, I've cut each of the 4 dowel rods down to the appropriate size so that they will submerge into the upper and lower portions of the base 1 inch, just to give us some good structural support. So we'll clamp our dowel rods here for all 4 of them. We'll do the same thing here, simply with a hand planer, and we're going to taper the ends so they fit just perfectly within the holes that our Forstner bits took out of our bases, the upper and the lower parts. But we'll use the hand plane and the spoke shave here and go for a hand crafted look. And we'll refrain from sanding on the dowels.
Can't beat that. Beautiful specimen.
Remarked an inch here. We just tapered these down a bit. Let's see. Oh, thanks. So I've measured and marked for the different geometries we want to cut out of this base here. And this is just total artistic license. So I've decided to go with a 25-degree angle on some of the legs, just so they're not such beasts sticking out, the platforms for the 4 parts sticking out of the legs of the base. And I'm just using a Ryoba saw here.
Who says a chisel can't be a planer?
So we'll match the front or the end bevel with the bevel that's on the left and right from our chamfer bit. We'll just do that with a hand planer here. So after final glue up and clamping overnight, letting the glue settle and unclamping, we'll start our finishing process. I wipe with a damp cloth, just with some water, just a damp cloth to remove any sawdust after vacuuming it off. But here we will apply some mineral spirits, let that settle for a day and dry. Then we'll apply Danish oil over the top of that. So here Watco makes an excellent Danish oil, and we're using the medium walnut variety of this. So it's got a bit of pigment in there, but not as much as the darker walnut, the black walnut, or some of the further darkened varieties of this Danish oil. But it's an excellent product. So we put it on there liberally. I use a little fragment of a t-shirt. It's just folded over a bit. So we're going to generously apply that to all the surfaces. At the end of that, we're going to let it all sit 15 minutes. We're going to watch it during those 15 minutes though. In any areas where it's soaked in and kind of looking dry quickly, we're going to reapply. After that coat is, everything is thoroughly coated, we're going to wait the full 15 minutes. And we're just going to come back through with some shop rags and thoroughly wipe off all the Danish oil. And we're going to let that dry fully for 24 hours, and we're going to do the same thing 2 more times. So this gets 3 full coats of Danish oil on all the surfaces, top, bottom, and that'll give us a really nice, durable, beautiful, lustrous finish. So with most handcrafted hardware like this, it goes together specifically best in one way rather than another. It's a little smoother when these 2 portions face each other rather than mirrored. So I added these 2 little buttons, and on the underside of the table you'll see a 3rd little button with arrows that point together. So when this is reassembled after being disassembled, we match those 3 up. And I've also added some hardware for locking the tabletop down to the base in 2 different places. You can see here in the upper left inset image a small piece of brass hardware that's one of 2 parts that will receive these latches. So you may have noticed on the underside of the table these 4 small cubes, one attached to each little drawer. And I put those in place just simply to attach a magnet on the opposite side facing the underside of the table. And as we slide the drawer closed, it matches a corresponding magnet inserted on the underside. It's just a small addition to ensure the drawers stay closed a little more securely. Well friends, thank you for joining me for this build. I hope you enjoyed it and found it fun to watch the process and the progress. Hope you found it inspirational. Happy building to you all. Don't forget to hit subscribe and like on the video or the channel. Thanks guys.